let's be honest here. Uncharted isn't remembered for Harry Flynn. This is what Uncharted is remembered for. How does Naughty Dog pull this off? Why are their set pieces so far above the rest of the industry? Well, if that was an easy answer, we wouldn't have to sit through crappy action movies anymore. But I'll try my best. For my money, there are 5 elements that go into creating a compelling set piece. And this is how Naughty Dog has utilized every single one of them. Welcome to the month of Uncharted, and you guessed it, this week we're talking set pieces. First, what is a set piece? Well, it's a term that comes from old Hollywood. You see, before CGI, if you wanted to do something cool or exciting in your movie, you actually had to build it. I know, right? So, over time, these moments were simply called set pieces because you usually had to build a custom set piece to pull them off. Today, set piece is just a blanket term used to describe any action-packed or intense sequence in a piece of media. Basically, the holy crap moments that you pay to see a blockbuster for. And while you write a set piece slightly differently for a video game, these tips can easily apply to filmmaking. With that out of the way, let's move on to our first element, novelty. A set piece lives or dies on its ideas. People aren't going to be entertained if this is the 3rd time they've played the same car chase. I'm looking at you, Drake's Deception. A set piece is the one place where a storyteller cannot play it safe. If you don't do something new or inventive, the only thing you'll succeed in doing is putting the audience to sleep. Novelty is adding a new element to a situation that forces the characters to act in an interesting way. This can be a new gun, an enemy type, or some crazy magic or technology. The sky's the limit. Another element of a compelling set piece is location. Location can make all the difference when used effectively. Sure, you could have a normal gunfight, but you could also have one while hanging off a building, or a street sign, or a burning plane, or, just hanging. I'll leave. Oftentimes, where the action is happening can be all you need to turn a familiar situation on its head. Alright, so you want to have novel ideas in an interesting location. By this logic, Among Thieves' train chase is a shoo-in. Except, not quite. I understand this set piece has its fans, and while I may not be one of them, I totally get why people like this one. There's a lot to like. And I also understand Naughty Dog's struggle. Train fights are notoriously hard to do because people have been doing them since the dawn of filmmaking. Every idea has been used up. It's nearly impossible to come up with anything new or original for them. But a wise man once said, "A good artist borrows, but a better artist steals." And steal Naughty Dog did. Among Thieves' train sequence combines elements from decades of train fights. There are low ceilings and signs that will kill you in one hit. You're able to scale the walls, roof, and interior of the train to get the jump on your opponents. There are these skylights you can use to rain death from above. The baddies use these miniguns that shoot through walls of entire compartments. There are claustrophobic brawls on the interior, dodging bullets on the roof, and much, much more. They essentially tried to make this level a love letter to train fights themselves. However, there are so many ideas on display here that it honestly feels more self-indulgent than anything else. This entire level, you're being introduced to mechanics only for them to be completely scrapped by the next checkpoint. I kept expecting these mechanics to work together or culminate into an explosive climax, but instead they're all thrown away in favor of a reused helicopter mini-boss. It's all build-up and no payoff. This brings us to our next rule for set pieces. Less is more. Bigger does not always equal better, and some of the best set pieces are built around a single idea or theme. Consider Stay in the Light from Uncharted 3: Drake's Deception. The level begins with Nathan Sully entering a crypt and lighting a torch. This subtly introduces the theme of fire. This theme is expanded upon when the crypt is filled with venomous spiders that are afraid of fire. And it also gives the scene a natural ticking clock as the fire begins to die. And finally, the torch is extinguished and the level is reduced to a mad dash to the finish line through winding corridors and a Crash Bandicoot-inspired finale. But Naughty Dog isn't done yet. Turning the theme of fire on its head, Nate and Sully now have to fight their way through a burning building. Suddenly, Nate is forced to run across crumbling floors and dodge falling debris, before finishing with another Crash Bandicoot-inspired segment that gives the whole level a sense of symmetry. Man, whoever made Crash Bandicoot should really sue Naughty Dog, because they're putting him in almost all the Uncharted games. Quick side note here, but something I wanted to bring up was Naughty Dog's love of symmetry in their games. You often notice that how a level begins, or how a game begins, is similar to how it will end. This is smart, economical storytelling that means that interesting mechanics or plot points can be brought back later with more dramatic weight. They're essentially turning mechanics into motifs, which is really heckin' cool. Uncharted 2, 3, 4, and The Last of Us all experiment with symmetry, but by far Among Thieves does this the most. For instance, the architecture of breaking and entering mirrors that of the end of the game, further drawing comparisons between the opening heist and the road to Shambhala, and drawing further comparisons between Flynn and Nate. When you enter the city in Urban Warfare, you run towards the camera, fleeing a truck. When you exit the city, it's the same way, only this time you're fleeing gunfire. In the chapter Keep Moving, you carry a bleeding man you hardly know to safety. At the end of the game, you carry Elena, the character you know best, in a similar way, thus making Nate's worst fears real and giving a sense of foreboding to the finale as you remember what happened to the last person Nate tried to drag to safety. It honestly could be argued that the entire game follows a mirrored structure, with the set-piece Trainwrecked being a sort of glue that holds it all together. Alright, side note over, let's get back to talking about Stay in the Light. What's even better is that they mirror the entire level in the second half of the game, with the dry dock and cruise ship set-piece. They introduce a theme, which this time is water, they build upon it by having shootouts in a ship graveyard, then they turn the set piece on its head. Funny enough, the set piece does this by literally turning the set on its head. Then they conclude with an action-packed finale that tests the player over everything they've learned. It's pretty cool that Naughty Dog used a similar formula to Stay in the Light. It gives the whole game a nice contrast between fire and water. However, if I had to choose who wore it better, please watch my other show, I'd have to say that Stay in the Light pulls off this trick much more gracefully, because it employed our next point: tangible consequences. A good set piece should fundamentally change something about the story. If it doesn't impact the characters in a noticeable way or change the course of a story, then why even bother? The dry dock segment of Uncharted 3 involves characters that we never see again. It doesn't show us anything new about Nathan Drake, and when it's all over, we just go back to the same place it started. You could cut this whole level from the game and it wouldn't make a difference. I already talked about the level A Rock in a Hard Place in my video on Uncharted 2, but it's a great example of this. It fundamentally changes the direction of the game and shows Nate is vulnerable. And the entire level takes on a whole new meaning when you play it a second time. Because the game starts in the wreckage of this train, it has an ominous presence when we see it again. Nate thinks he's going to play the hero and rescue Chloe, but we know that something is going to go catastrophically wrong along the way. The train seems bound for an inevitable destination, and the closer the train gets to the mountain's peak, the more the tension rises. To be honest, the emotional stakes almost make the train set piece worthwhile for me. Which brings us to our next point: emotional weight. If the consequences are big enough, or the emotional weight is strong enough, a set piece can completely forget about location or novelty or any of that jazz. Just take a look at how the character Nadine is introduced in Uncharted 4. This scene doesn't have a noticeable gimmick, its location is bland, and ultimately it's just the same fistfight you've already done a dozen times. And yet, this manages to be one of the most compelling character introductions in the series. Nathan Drake's life is a power fantasy. He's smart, handsome, and can punch his way out of any problem. So when Nadine not only beats Nathan Drake, but wipes the floor with him, the player takes notice. Suddenly, there's someone who Nate can't punch through, a situation that all the one-liners in the world can't fix. The feeling of helplessness, the consequences that such a character exists in Nate's world, that is what sells the scene. Novelty, location, simplicity, consequences, and emotion. Any one of these 5 elements make a good set piece, but what makes Naughty Dog truly great is they know how to utilize them all. In fact, Naughty Dog is so effective at using these elements that I barely had time to discuss Uncharted 4's heart-pounding action sequences. Oh well, I guess you're gonna have to tune in next week for my video on A Thief's End. Trust me, it's gonna be a doozy.